At the neighborhood block party in front of 30 of his neighbors, Trent Caldwell threw a pair of boxing gloves down at the feet of a 63-year-old black man named Isaiah Reed. "Put them on, old man. Today everybody's going to see exactly how weak you really are." Isaiah did not bend down to pick them up. He unbuckled the worn watch from his wrist and handed it to his granddaughter. The thought in his head was not whether he could win. It was that dozens of phones had gone up around that lawn, and he knew exactly what a 63-year-old black man looked like in a few seconds of video cut in the right place. Before that afternoon ended, Trent's black belt would mean nothing at all, and the entire Caldwell family would pay for what they had never once been told to fear. The men who once served under Isaiah Reed would not have recognized the way he spent his mornings now. He woke at 5 out of habit, he had stopped trying to break, made coffee, and stood at the kitchen window watching the light come up over the fence line. By 6, he was in the garden behind the house staking tomatoes and pulling the weeds that came up through the gravel path. By 7, he was in the driveway with the truck door open, waiting for his granddaughter to find whichever shoe she had lost the night before. He was 63. He wore the same 2 sweaters all winter and work pants that had gone soft at the knees, and he moved slowly on the right side because of a knee that had been rebuilt twice and never quite forgave him for it. Twice a week, he drove out to a freight yard or a data center and spent 4 hours walking a perimeter with a clipboard telling men half his age which doors they had stopped thinking about. The company that sent him was called Sentinel Risk Group. When neighbors asked what he did there, he said he consulted on security, and that was the end of it. Nobody on that street asked what he had done before. There was nothing about him that invited the question. He was the man who fixed the children's bicycle chains in his driveway on Saturdays, the man who ran an extension cord across the property line when the Hendersons lost power for 2 days, the man who backed out of arguments the way other men backed out of driveways carefully and without looking at anyone. His granddaughter had noticed one thing about him, though. Nia Reed was 16 and paid attention to everything, which was a quality she had gotten from him, whether either of them liked it or not. She had watched a hardware store clerk talk to her grandfather one afternoon in a way that made her ears burn, and Isaiah had said thank you, taken his change, and walked out. In the truck, she asked him why he had let the man speak to him like that. Isaiah looked at the windshield for a while before he answered her. "Because I don't get to be the loudest man in the room." He did not explain it. She did not ask again. There was a folder in the drawer under the telephone that Nia had never opened. Her mother, Denise, was an Army nurse who had signed on to an 18-month medical relief rotation overseas, and the paperwork for what happened to Nia in the meantime lived in that drawer. Isaiah had temporary guardianship. It was not a permanent arrangement, and it was not meant to be one, and every few months a caseworker named Patricia Hale came by with a clipboard of her own. She came in April. She sat at the kitchen table and drank half a cup of coffee and asked Nia the questions she was required to ask, and Nia answered them while eating cereal board. Ms. Hale complimented the house, which was clean, and the garden, which was better than clean. She signed her name at the bottom of 2 pages, said she would see them in the fall, and let herself out. Isaiah put the folder back in the drawer and shut it. The Caldwells moved into the big house at the corner of the street that same spring. Harrison Caldwell had made his money in freight, buying trucking companies that were bleeding out, stripping them for what could be sold, and moving on before the employees finished filing their claims. He was loud in the way that men who have never been interrupted are loud. He believed with total sincerity that the world had become a place where success was punished, and he said so at the neighborhood association meeting within a month of arriving. His son Trent was 20 and enormous, and carried a black belt from a commercial studio 2 towns over that put its trophy winners on a billboard by the highway. He had taken medals in point fighting tournaments where the pads were thick and the referee stopped everything the second contact went past a certain line. He moved beautifully. He had never in his life been hit by someone who was not required to stop. Nia heard Harrison say it to him one evening across the fence in a voice that carried the way it always did. "They hate you because you win, Trent. Don't you ever apologize for that." The man meant it. That was the part that mattered. He was not saying it to build a monster. He was saying it because he loved his son and believed it was true. Oak Haven had been quiet for 22 years, which was exactly as long as Isaiah had lived in it. His was the smallest house on the street, and the oldest a single-story place he had bought before the school district got its rating, and the lots on the corner tripled. The Caldwell house stood beside it like a hand held up next to a coin. He had installed the cameras himself, one over the front door, one at the corner of the garage, one facing the driveway. He had done it years earlier out of nothing more than the habit of a man who had spent 2 decades learning that a room with one exit is not a room, it is a container. He still sat in restaurants where he could see the door. He still took his watch off before he did anything that required both hands and set it somewhere he could find it in the dark. He had taught Nia the only 3 things he wanted her to know. If a situation felt wrong, get away from it. Get to where other people could see you. Turn your camera on. And one more which she had thought was strange at the time. If anything ever happens to me, he told her, you call Sam Brooks first, then you call the police. She asked why in that order. Her grandfather said Admiral Brooks was an old friend and left it there. Trent started early in the summer and worked his way up. He shouted at a delivery driver for parking too close to the gate. He stood in the middle of the street until a boy on a bicycle had to swerve into the grass to get around him. He kicked another kid's soccer ball down a storm drain and laughed about it. He hung a heavy bag from the branch that reached over the property line and hit it hard enough that leaves came down into Isaiah's tomatoes for a week. He idled his car at 11 at night with the windows down. Isaiah did none of the things a neighbor might have expected. He believed small disputes were solved by drawing a line and holding it, not by walking across it to make a point. And so he waited. Then it stopped being small. It was a Sunday in July, and Nia was washing the truck in the driveway with the radio going, and Trent came up the drive without being asked. He reached through the open window, turned the radio off, and broke the volume knob off the dash with his thumb. Tell your grandfather this street doesn't belong to him anymore. Nia was frightened, and she did exactly what she had been taught. She stepped backward toward the street where the Hendersons could see her, and she got her phone up, and she did not say a word. The screen door opened behind her. Isaiah crossed the driveway and stopped between them, which put his back to his granddaughter and his hands open at his sides. He did not raise his voice. What he said almost politely. You're standing on my property. I'm asking you to leave. Trent stepped in close, right up under his chin, the way he had been taught to crowd an opponent out of the ring. Isaiah did not move and did not step back, and did not look away. Trent smiled at that, because a man who would not fight him was a man who could not, and he walked off down the drive like something had been settled in his favor. Inside the house, Isaiah put a hand on the counter and let out a breath he had been holding for longer than his granddaughter realized. He can disrespect me all he wants, he told her quietly. But he will not touch you. He will not touch what's mine, and he will not touch a single child on this street. He did not say it where Trent could hear it. He did not say it where a phone could hear it either. Harrison came over that evening and stood on the front step and explained at volume that his son had been threatened by a grown man twice his age and that he would not have it. Isaiah let him finish. He did not argue a single point. Watching Trent walk away that afternoon, Isaiah had understood something that had nothing to do with the fight the boy so obviously wanted. The kid's technique was not the problem. His hands were fast. His base was better than half the men Isaiah had trained, and somebody at that studio had taught him well. The problem was that no one had ever once made him separate, being able to hurt somebody from being allowed to. The black belt had not created that. It had simply handed it a tool. Isaiah never taught his granddaughter how to hit anyone back. He taught her to move toward people who could see her, to turn her camera on, and to call an adult she trusted. It turned out the first step in protecting yourself was rarely a fist. It was staying calm enough not to hand the decision over to whoever wanted you afraid. After that Sunday, Trent got smarter about it. He moved his training to the strip of grass that ran along the fence, so that every afternoon there was a young man in a sleeveless shirt throwing combinations 12 feet from where Isaiah worked in his garden. He clipped the heads off the coneflowers Nia had planted along the walk and did it with his heel in passing so that it always looked like an accident. He said things when she went by that were loud enough for her to hear and quiet enough to deny. He told his friends the old man had gotten scared, and the story traveled the way those stories do, and within 2 weeks the kids Nia had grown up with on that street had stopped waving at her from their yards. Isaiah did the thing a reasonable man is supposed to do. He filed a complaint with the neighborhood association about the heavy bag over the property line and the noise after 10. Harrison knew 2 people on the board and had already taken all 3 of them to dinner, and the complaint came back with a note suggesting that both parties work toward a neighborly resolution. At the association meeting at the end of July, Harrison stood up and said in the reasonable voice of a man discussing property values that residents who could not maintain the standard of the neighborhood might want to consider whether they would be happier somewhere more suited to them. He did not look at Isaiah when he said it. He did not need to. That night, Isaiah sat down at the kitchen table with his laptop and did something Nia did not understand for a long time. He made a folder. He pulled the footage off the doorbell camera and the garage camera going back 6 weeks, and he clipped every incident and numbered it, and he wrote the date and the time on each one in a plain text file. He photocopied the complaint and the association's response. He backed all of it up twice, once to a drive in the desk and once to the Sentinel server, and then he sat there checking the file names one more time while his coffee went cold. Nia stood in the doorway watching him do it and finally asked why he was putting himself through all that. It was one kid. It was a heavy bag and some flowers. Isaiah did not look up from the screen right away. If he and I are both standing out on that grass, he said, and we both say we didn't start it, who do you think they believe? She did not have an answer for him. I don't get to just be right, Nia. I have to be able to prove I was right. From before it happens. He closed the laptop and went to bed, and she stayed in the kitchen a while longer, looking at the drawer under the telephone without knowing why. The first week of August, Trent brought 2 friends home from the studio. They set up on the grass strip and worked pads, and every few rounds one of them said something in Isaiah's direction, and the other 2 laughed. Isaiah was cutting back the branch the heavy bag hung from, which was the only part of the whole business that was actually his to fix. He asked them, without any particular edge in his voice, to keep back from the garden beds. Trent stepped over the property line and took a handful of Isaiah's collar. The friend standing closest was a kid named Danny Frazier, and afterward, when people asked him what happened, he could never tell it right. He remembered Trent grabbing the old man's shirt. He remembered the old man not doing anything about it, which was the part he had expected. Then he blinked, and in the space of that blink, Trent was down on one knee in the grass, with his arm bent up somewhere behind his own shoulder, and Isaiah had already backed off 2 steps with his hands in his jacket pockets. Nobody saw the middle of it. Danny had been looking directly at both of them, and he had not seen the middle of it. Isaiah nodded at the ground where Trent was kneeling. Watch that soft spot, son. The other 2 got their laughing under control about half a second too late, and that was the injury. The grass had not hurt him. His arm had not hurt him. Being on his knees while 2 people from his own studio tried not to laugh was going to sit in Trent Caldwell for a long time. Isaiah went inside believing he had done the right thing. That was the mistake, and it was an honest one. He had shown the boy exactly where the line was and had not marked him in the process. In his experience, that was usually enough. Men who were shown a limit without being humiliated tended to respect it, or at least to test something else instead. Nia thought it was over too. For about 4 days, the street was quiet, and she started using the front walk again instead of cutting through the back. But Trent went home and told himself a story on the way, and by the time he got to the door, he believed it. The old man had used some trick. It had been a cheap shot from a bad angle, and it would not work twice. He told his father a shorter version. He said the old man had come at him from behind. Harrison Caldwell did not question it for 1 second. He came across the lawn that evening and stood on the step and put a finger into Isaiah's chest and told him he would be hearing from an attorney, and his voice shook while he said it. He was not performing. He had a picture in his head of his son on the ground with a man's hands on him, and that picture had been put there by his son, and he had no reason on earth to doubt it. Isaiah stood in the doorway and let him finish and closed the door, and that was the whole of it. 2 weeks later, Harrison threw a party. It was ostensibly for Trent's promotion at the studio, though the promotion had come in June. There were caterers and a tent and 40 people from the freight side of Harrison's business, and at some point in the evening, Trent told the story to a half circle of them on the patio, and in that version, Isaiah had come out of the dark behind him. Nia found the video that same night. Danny Frazier had posted it 11 seconds taken over the fence. It began with Isaiah's hand on Trent's wrist and Trent going down. It did not begin with a hand on Isaiah's collar. The first 4 seconds of the recording were simply not there. Underneath it, there were already 140 comments. The street split the way streets do. The Hendersons believed Isaiah and said so quietly to Isaiah. Some of the others had contracts with Caldwell Freight or hoped to, and they stopped bringing it up at all. And there was a third group, the largest one, who thought that the whole thing had gotten out of hand, and that if Isaiah simply apologized for something for anything, everyone could go back to their weekends. Harrison watched those 11 seconds more times than he watched anything else that month. He watched them on his phone in the car. He watched them at his desk, and every single time he saw precisely what he already believed a big man bigger than his boy had led him to expect putting hands on a 20-year-old kid. Everything Harrison Caldwell did after that, every phone call, every threat, every decision that eventually took his company apart, came out of those 11 seconds. Isaiah did not answer the video. He did not post anything, and he did not go door to door with the original footage, though he had it. He copied the clip, logged where it came from and when, and put it in the folder with everything else. He and Nia sat out on the porch late that night with the lights off. She asked him why he did not just tell people who he had been. 1 sentence. He could end the entire thing in 1 sentence, and everyone on the street would take his side by morning. "You're right," her grandfather said. "That's the problem." She waited for him to explain it, and he did in a roundabout way that took her a year to fully understand. If it took 20 years in the Navy to make people believe him, then the neighbors who did not have 20 years in the Navy had nothing to put on the table at all. Mrs. Ruiz down the block had called the association about that same heavy bag in June, and nothing had come of it. A street is only actually safe when the word of an ordinary person is heavy enough on its own. And even if Isaiah Reed had never commanded anybody, never done a single thing worth sealing a file over, Trent's behavior would still be wrong, and Harrison's threat would still be unacceptable. His past made him interesting. It was not the reason he deserved to be believed. Nia thought about that for a while in the dark. "Then why keep the folder?" "Because I'd like to be believed and interesting," he said. "But I'll settle for believed." The block party fell on the Sunday of Labor Day weekend, the way it had every year for as long as Isaiah had lived on that street. The association put out tables on the common lawn at the end of the cul-de-sac. There were coolers and folding chairs and a speaker playing somebody's playlist, and about 60 people, most of them families, and a dozen kids running through the sprinkler somebody had set up at the far end. The Caldwells arrived an hour in, and Trent came dressed for it. He wore competition shorts and a rash guard, and he carried 2 pairs of gloves, 1 in each hand, and he brought Danny Frazier and 3 others from the studio with him. They came across the grass in a group, and the conversation nearest to them stopped, and then the conversation next to that one stopped, and by the time Trent got to the middle of the lawn, there was a clear space around him, and everybody was watching. Isaiah was standing near the drinks table with Nia. The president of the neighborhood association was 6 feet away with a paper plate in his hand. Trent threw the gloves down at Isaiah's feet. "Put them on, old man." He said the rest of it loudly because he had come to say it loudly. He said he was going to put Isaiah on his knees in front of his granddaughter. Somebody's phone came up, and then another one, and then a dozen. And before Isaiah could decide anything at all, Harrison Caldwell walked up beside his son and said the only thing anybody said that whole afternoon that actually frightened Isaiah Reed. He did not shout it. He said it at conversational volume, close in the tone of a man laying out a fair warning. "You put your hands on my son again, I won't sue you. I'll call Child Protective Services." A man with a documented history of violence raising a 16-year-old girl on temporary paperwork with her mother on the other side of the world. How long do you think they leave her here? Isaiah did not move. For the first time since any of it started, he was looking at something that his hands could not solve. Not one part of what he knew how to do was any use. He could put Trent Caldwell on the ground in 4 seconds, and those 4 seconds could be the ones that took his granddaughter out of his house. He ran it out the way he had run out worse things in worse places, and every road ended in the same field. If he walked away, Trent kept coming, and the next time, it would not be flowers or a broken knob. It would be Nia, and there would be no one standing between them. If he fought, there was footage. And there was a father who genuinely believed his son was the victim, and there was a folder in a drawer under the telephone that a caseworker read every few months. And if he stood there and let the boy hit him, 60 people with phones would record a scuffle, and the 11 seconds that survived would be whichever 11 seconds somebody chose. Around him, the lawn had gone completely quiet. 60 adults, and not one of them stepped forward. The association president looked at his plate. 2 men who had shaken Isaiah's hand at that same table the year before found somewhere else to look. Then Trent turned and walked toward Nia and pointed at her and told the crowd what the old man's granddaughter was about to watch. Isaiah moved. He took his phone out of his pocket and put it in Nia's hand, and then he unbuckled the watch from his wrist and put that in her hand, too, and closed her fingers around both of them. "Go stand with Mrs. Henderson. Don't come back over here." She wanted to argue with him. He was already turning away. He walked out to the middle of the lawn, and then he did something that looked to almost everyone there like an old man stalling for time. He spoke slowly and clearly and loudly enough to carry to the back of the crowd, and he faced the phones while he did it. He said he did not want to fight anyone. He said he was asking Trent Caldwell to stop and to leave the event. He said that if he was attacked, he would defend himself using the minimum force necessary to stop it, and nothing beyond that. Trent laughed at him. Harrison raised his own phone and started recording, certain he was about to capture the thing that would end this. It was not a hero's speech. Nobody out there understood what they were listening to. It was a statement given under oath in front of 60 witnesses before the fact. And before he stepped out onto that grass, Isaiah Reed had spent 3 of the most valuable seconds of his life putting a teenage girl behind another adult. Those seconds did not win him anything. They only showed what a man does when everything is about to go wrong, that there is almost always still time to see to the most vulnerable person present before you start thinking about proving anything. Trent pulled the gloves on and started to move. He gave the crowd what they had come for, or what he thought they had come for, a fast, slipping bounce on the balls of his feet, a shoulder roll, 2 combinations thrown at the air with a snap in them that made somebody near the drinks table say something admiring under their breath. Isaiah did not pick up the second pair of gloves. He did not take off his shirt. He did not say one word about who he had been. He simply turned slightly, so his right side was back and his weight was over his left leg, and let his hands hang open at chest height. To Trent, that was the stance of a man who did not know how to fight. To the 2 or 3 people out on that lawn who had ever done this for real, it was a man who could defend himself from where he stood and could not possibly be described as advancing. Trent came first exactly the way he had been taught to open a jab and a straight right at the head. Fast clean meant to end things while the crowd was still watching. Isaiah did not throw anything back. He stepped off the line at an angle, brought his forearm and his shoulder across the path of the punch rather than into it, and let Trent's own commitment carry him through. The right hand went past Isaiah's ear into empty air, and Trent had to catch himself on his lead foot to keep from going down in front of everyone. Somebody in the crowd made a noise. Trent heard it. He came back angry, and he came back with his best thing, the spinning kick that had taken 2 of his trophies. He was wrong about the distance. He had trained it against opponents who backed up, and Isaiah did not back up. Isaiah stepped inside the arc before the leg had any real weight behind it and put his hands on the post leg to take the base away, and his right knee went out from under him. It had been rebuilt twice. It had held for 63 years of standing on it, and it chose that half second with his weight rolled onto it and another man's body driving across it to fold. Isaiah Reed went down on the grass in front of the entire street. He heard Nia's voice from somewhere behind him, and it did not sound like her. For 2 seconds, he was on his back, and Trent Caldwell was standing over him, and there was nothing between them at all. 60 people watched an old man fall down, and the ones who had been telling themselves this would be fine stopped telling themselves that. From the ground, Isaiah knew 2 things that would have ended it right there. He had been taught both of them a long time ago by men who were not interested in fairness, and either one would have finished the fight in under a second and left something inside Trent Caldwell permanently different. His hands knew where to go. He did not send them. He rolled away, instead got a knee under himself, came up off his left leg and gave ground 3 steps back, weight on the good side hands still open. "This can be over right now," he said. Harrison's voice came across the lawn. He was not thinking about lawyers anymore or about the standard of the neighborhood. He had just watched his son knock a man down, and every wrong thing he believed had been confirmed in front of witnesses. Break his leg. Whatever discipline the studio had put into Trent went out of him in that moment. He stopped fighting like anything he had been taught. He put his head down and rushed arms wide to take the old man to the ground and be on top of him. Isaiah dropped his hips, turned him at the shoulder, and used the momentum to put him down instead. Then he moved with him, got his weight settled across Trent's back, and one arm folded up and stopped. He did not choke him unconscious. He did not do any of the 4 things available to him. He held the boy in a position from which no further attack was possible, and he held it and nothing else. Trent bucked twice. He tried to turn his hips and could not. Then his breathing changed into something high and fast, the sound of a 20-year-old discovering for the first time in his life that he was not going to be allowed to get up, and he slapped the grass 3 times. Isaiah let go on the first slap. He was already backing away up on his good leg, already turning his open hands toward the phones. He had not thrown a single punch. And every person on that lawn had just seen what he had paid to keep it that way. Harrison was on the phone to the police before his son had gotten off the ground. He told the dispatcher his son had been assaulted by a neighbor, an older man, with military training at a public event, and his voice came apart twice while he said it. He was not lying. That was the thing about Harrison Caldwell that nobody standing there understood yet. He had just watched his boy get put face down in the grass, and he had been fed a story about the last incident by the only person he trusted completely, and he believed every syllable of what he was reporting. 2 officers arrived in under 10 minutes. For a few minutes, it looked exactly like the disaster Isaiah had spent 2 months preparing for. There was a young man sitting on the grass with grass stains and a red mark on his forearm, and there was a 63-year-old man standing 20 feet away with no marks on him at all, and there was a father in a golf shirt telling one of the officers at increasing volume that this was assault and he wanted it treated as assault. The officer taking Isaiah's statement asked him whether anyone had recorded any of it. What happened next did not happen the way people describe it now. It was not a dramatic thing. It was a line. Nia came forward first because she had started her camera before Trent finished throwing the gloves down, and she had never stopped. Then the Henderson's son, who was 15, and had filmed the whole event on his phone from the sidewalk because he filmed everything. Then Mrs. Ruiz, who said her doorbell camera faced straight out onto the common lawn and had been recording continuously since she installed it in the spring. And then Danny Frazier, who had been live streaming for his friends at the studio and still had the original file walked over, holding his phone out in front of him with both hands, and would not look at Trent while he did it. 4 angles, all of them showing the same sequence. Trent Caldwell throwing gloves at a man's feet and stating what he intended to do to him. Isaiah Reed refusing out loud 3 separate times. Isaiah announcing in front of everyone that he would use only the force needed to stop an attack. Trent throwing the first punch, Harrison shouting at his son to break the man's leg, and Isaiah releasing him within a second of the tap-out and walking backward with his hands open. Then the rest of it came out, and that was the part nobody had planned. The delivery driver who worked that route had dash camera footage from June of a young man standing in the road blocking his van and pounding on the hood. A woman named Karen Petrie said her 10-year-old had been shoved off the sidewalk into the street in July and that she had not reported it because she did not want any trouble with that family. Mrs. Ruiz mentioned her complaint about the heavy bag and how it had come back marked resolved. It stopped being one man's word against a wealthy family's. It became a file. Harrison did not read the room. He walked up to the senior officer and started listing the people he knew, a name on the city council, a name at the county, the amount of business his company brought into the area, and he did it standing in a semicircle of 60 people who all still had their phones out. Every word of it was recorded by the same cameras he had been so certain would exonerate his son. What saved Isaiah Reed on that lawn was not 20 years in the Navy. Nobody there knew about it, and nobody there needed to. What saved him were the evenings he had spent numbering camera clips at his own kitchen table, and the fact that in 2 months of provocation, he had never once let himself be the loudest man in the room. The officers told Harrison before they left that his son could be looking at charges for assault and for making threats. Harrison came across the grass toward Isaiah as the crowd was breaking up. He had lost the thread of the thing entirely by then and was working on the only lever he had left. He said he would find out where the old man worked. He said he would make one phone call and Isaiah would not have a job by the end of the month. He assumed because the house was small and the truck was 15 years old that he was talking to a junior contractor who checked badges at a gate. Isaiah did not argue with him. He looked at him for a moment and gave him the only warning he was going to get. You should find out a great deal more before you make that call. Harrison made the call anyway. He hired someone first, which took 8 days, and what came back was the name Sentinel Risk Group. He telephoned the federal contracting office handling the freight solicitation he had been chasing for a year and a half, a logistics award worth tens of millions, and reported that one of Sentinel's people was violent and unstable and had attacked his son, and that Caldwell Freight would consider withdrawing its bid entirely if the man was not removed. He believed he had finally found the soft place. Isaiah Reed had not been an employee of Sentinel Risk Group in the sense Harrison meant. He had founded it 11 years earlier. He chaired its risk review board. Sentinel was the firm the contracting office used to assess whether freight partners could be trusted with sensitive government cargo, and Caldwell Freight had been on Sentinel's assessment list for that exact award since March. Admiral Samuel Brooks called him at 7 the next morning. Isaiah, the man who just called my office demanding I fire you, you're aware he's on your own assessment list. Recuse yourself from that file today, and I need you not to say one more word about him to anybody. Isaiah recused himself before 9. An independent panel took the file over, and the panel read the record. The recorded threat to a review official, the attempt to use a federal contracting office as leverage in a private dispute, the pattern of conduct involving the man's own heir, and what all of it said about how Caldwell Freight assessed and managed risk internally. Caldwell Freight was removed from consideration in the second week of October. Harrison Caldwell did not lose that contract because Isaiah Reed took it from him. He lost it because he made the call. Patricia Hale came in the second week of October as well, exactly as she had said she would back in April. She had seen the video by then the way most of the county had. She sat at the same kitchen table and asked Nia the same questions she was required to ask, and Nia answered them, and Ms. Hale signed her name at the bottom of 2 pages and said she would see them in the spring. That was all of it. The threat that had been the only thing in the world Isaiah could not fight took her 11 minutes to end, and she never knew she had ended it. The video went out past Oak Haven within days. By the end of the first week, it had been watched several million times, and by the second week, it had reached the one person Trent had never considered. Master Daniel Cole watched all 4 angles from start to finish in his office at the studio twice. What he cared about was not that one of his black belts had lost to a man 43 years older. Losing was not the finding. He wrote out the finding in a letter to the boy's family, and it was short. His student had issued the challenge. His student had used what he had been taught in that building to intimidate a neighbor and a child. His student had attacked a man who had refused the fight 3 times in front of 60 witnesses. And his student had done all of it wearing a belt this school had put around his waist. Cole suspended him and asked for the belt back. "Technique can win you a match," he told Trent in the hallway. "Without discipline, all it makes you is a hazard." The others from the studio stopped answering him. Danny Frazier had already stopped. Trent lost the standing he had spent 4 years building in about 9 days, and the county diversion program he entered instead came with community service hours and a court-ordered anger management course that ran on Tuesday nights. He was walking back from the second of those sessions in November when he saw Isaiah Reed in his own driveway, kneeling on a folded towel next to an overturned bicycle with a boy of about 8 holding the handlebars steady for him. Trent stopped on the far sidewalk. Isaiah got the chain back on, spun the pedal to check it, and then reached out and put his hand flat on the seat and pushed himself up, and his right hand came down onto his knee and stayed there, taking his weight while he got the leg under him. It took him 4 or 5 seconds to stand all the way up. Trent had been telling a story to himself since Labor Day about a trick and a bad angle. Standing on that sidewalk, he understood that the old man's knee had gone out on that lawn before he ever hit the ground, that it had been hurting him since September, and that Isaiah Reed had not told a single person on that street about it. Isaiah looked up and saw him there. He gave one small nod, the kind of nod men give each other at gas stations, and then he turned back to the bicycle and said something to the boy that made him laugh. Nothing anyone said to Trent Caldwell that entire autumn hurt him half as much. What Nia remembered about that afternoon in the end was not her grandfather putting Trent Caldwell face down in the grass. It was the letting go. On the first slap, not the third, not 1 beat early and not 1 beat late. It took her a long time to understand what she had watched. The hard part of strength was never learning how to use it. It was knowing exactly when to stop at the one moment when there was no longer anyone left who could make you